Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Indy's Trusted Servant Show on InspireSmall.biz. What's Indy's Trusted Servant? Well, that's me, Danny O'Malia, Indy's Trusted Servant. I do customer service training and keynote speaking about customer service. It's all about the culture of the organization, whether it's a business or a not-for-profit. I learned all of that at the hand of the master, my late father, Joe O'Malia, back in the O'Malia Food Market days. But even before that, when Joe had a little grocery store in Broad Ripple in the mid-50s, had about 9 or 10 employees. One of them was an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old kid, myself, and he lost that store. That's a long story we don't have time for, but 10 years later, he came back and successfully launched O'Malia Food Markets with 9 stores and 950 employees. And one of my lessons from my dad was never, ever, ever give up. At any rate, if you'd like to learn more about my customer service training and or keynote speaking, give me a call at 317-413-9062. What's the Indy's Trusted Servant Show on InspireSmall.biz? I like to describe it as lively, local, small biz and community talk where you can feel the pulse of Indy. For you regulars, several months ago I interviewed my daughter Colleen Stein about her 2 businesses, and today it's my pleasure to bring to you my oldest daughter, Janet Andriole. She's going to tell you about her background in education as well as her new venture in tutoring. That's probably the one-word description,
safest,
right?
Yes.
So, Janet, tell everybody about your background.
Well, I'm a longtime educator. Did not come by it easily because I myself was not a stellar student, and so
you got better in college, though.
Yeah, I was a late bloomer, and kind of when I got to study really what I did want to study instead of what I had to, it sort of all kicked in, and found myself in the classroom. I taught 11 years in Warren Township on the east side.
And what grades?
I taught in grades 3, 4, and 5 in the inclusive classrooms, which was a real popular model in the 90s, and my principal, Mr. Leon Carter, was a champion of making sure we met the needs of diverse learners across all categories, especially academic, because that's where we're measured the most.
And which Warren schools did you teach in?
I was at Grassy Creek Elementary for 10 years, and then the 11th year, I went and worked for Dr. Dina Cushenberry at Liberty Park Elementary. And I thought I would be there longer until the Lord had different plans for me.
Well, we'll get into that a little bit more. So what came next?
So next I was at St. Louis de Montfort because my sister texted me one day and said, we have a 5th grade opening. It's your favorite grade. Why don't you join me? And it was a struggle because Warren Township was one of the highest paying districts. And St. Louis de Montfort, along with all of our private schools, just can't reach it.
Now, there was another reason that you moved from Warren to St. Louis de Montfort, the fact that your family moved from the east side to Carmel.
Yeah,
right?
We live on your street.
Right, that's right.
So we moved north and wanted to send our kids to Catholic school like we had always gone. Rich went to Holy Spirit on the east side. I went to Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Carmel. And we
tell them about your other 2 schools. Our Lady of Mount Carmel, then?
Our Lady of Mount Carmel, and then Cathedral.
And then?
And then Xavier University.
Go Cathedral, go Xavier.
And then Butler. So I just followed all your footsteps.
I got my master's degree at Butler, for those of you who don't know that.
I even got to go to St. Michael's, where Dad went to grade school for 1 year. And then they rudely uprooted me and moved me, but I landed okay at Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Okay, so now to Louis de Montfort. What year would that have been?
That would have been 2004.
Okay.
2004. Okay. I stayed there till 2014 after we lost our sister, as many of you know the story. And at the time, a friend of mine at the Indiana Department of Education reached out to me and said, would you be interested, in working here in educator licensing?
But by that time, you had become assistant principal at Louis de Montfort.
Yeah, I'd gone to Butler's program for preparing school principals, the experiential. It's called the EPPSP program, and it's renowned and well attended, and a great fraternity sorority of local educators. And because I had that credentialing, I was eligible for this position. So I worked for the DOE for a couple years. Then at the transition,
you were mostly in teacher licensing. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's educator licensing, so it's all school nurses, counselors, social workers, In-state is kind of common sense because we have educator preparation programs, around the state that one of my close colleagues, Scott Bogan, oversees. And but there's then the out-of-state world and what it means to move from other countries or other of the 50 states. And that becomes different because everybody had different.
For licensing.
For licensing.
Right.
So very small staff doing a lot, they still work at great speed and with great accuracy. So I'm still in touch with those people.
Good
largely.
for you. Good for you. But then God was speaking to you again.
Yeah, well, the transition of the state superintendent required a change, at all levels. And it's common to lose a job at that time. And so I was a casualty of that. But I didn't ever look at those things in a negative way. I look at it as God opening a door. So I just threw my application out. I landed a 10-week opportunity to teach in Hamilton Southeastern District.
Now that's a pretty interesting story in and of itself.
Yeah.
Explain how that evolved with the teacher being ill.
I was at a volleyball tournament the first weekend of like a club volleyball, and a girl at the table was announcing that she was going to be having surgery and be out of school for a while. Before I knew that, actually, she didn't at the table. We talked about what we liked the best in our jobs, and I said my favorite thing to ever do was teach 5th grade, and I basically lit and social studies and blended all together. And she did not announce it at the time, but contacted me a couple days later, like, I couldn't believe that you said that. It was almost like you were specifically sent to the table because I have to be off for a double mastectomy.
And she ended up okay.
She ended up okay.
This is good.
She's good. She's back in the place. I was going to teach for 6 weeks, but it ended up 10, and it renewed in me both confidence that I could still do the classroom, as well as revealed what was new in the years I had been administrating, because there's always some technological advancements and so forth, and the fact that I still liked and had patience for kids. So that was a good thing. And then I decided to just cast the net, throw the fishing lines out, and decide I can teach, I can administrate, I can go public, I can go private, and the Lord will show me where that will lead.
Where did it lead?
St. Joan of Arc. St. Joan of Arc Catholic School, which was quite a blending of all the roads, a little bit of mix of everything I had sort of done to that point in time, I realized in the principal life. So
your experience at Warren probably helped you a lot at Joan of Arc, right?
Immensely.
Yeah.
A lot of different families. I love the families at Joan of Arc. They choose it. They come from larger distance than many Catholic schools, are more like local, kind of the families that live around. Some of them, that's not a rule, but like neighborhood schools, especially in this area, of Indianapolis. And in Joan of Arc, we had people driving, from all over the place, plus locally. So it was
a lot like Cathedral is too.
Real
they
similar.
come from all over the place.
Smaller.
Yeah.
So that was a great opportunity. I just decided, after 5 years, that I just wanted to try something different. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and a lot of topics that kind of move you away from, I felt like away from why did I get into education in the first place, and politics, fundraising, marketing, all those things, which I really like the opportunity to learn, but do take away from education.
The one-on-one with kids.
Right, which is kind of where I am now. I consulted this past year, so I had the opportunity to work in so many schools. As you knew, I drove all over the place and worked with so many teachers and got to see so many classrooms, and it renewed.
And when you say all over the place, you mean all over the state of Indiana. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I got to see so many things, and it renewed this zeal. I think zeal is a good word for it, but I became interested in working with students again. And I thought, I'm doing myself a disservice, as well as kids I could be working with who might have been like me, might have been in class, might have been daydreaming, might have not been able to.
Might have been daydreaming. I like that, Janet. This honesty at the age of 53.
Well, there's no lie. I had ADHD before it was popular.
That's
and
right.
Maybe a touch of dyslexia as well. So I kind of thought, and sometimes I remembered hiring my own tutor, because you and Mom made me pay for it, in high school. And when I sat one-to-one and learned algebra, significantly different than when I'm in a classroom of 25 people who I don't want to raise my hand or feel foolish for asking a question.
Or you're writing a note.
I might have been.
Might have been.
Many. So I just decided to venture into this opportunity. But then I was recognizing I'm taking Dave Ramsey's Financial Solutions and a Structure and Style writing course because I wanted to expand my repertoire of ages I could work with. And I really started thinking about this small group environment, which I think students benefit from, as opposed to individual only tutoring.
So we've caught up to Learn Away with Mrs. A, your new venture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so my son Nick and my sister Colleen and I were in a group text kind of throwing ideas around because she was developing my website. She's a genius. She does so much for people because she's kind enough to say yes and not charge anybody. Yeah. And my website is ridiculous. The fact that someone has just built this for me and I don't have any financial skin in the game because she and I worked all of May creating it, working back and forth with content, with her creativity, and the result is the Learn Away with Mrs. A, www.learnawaywithmrsa.com website. Okay.
So describe Learn Away with Mrs. A.
So I had this vision of both helping individual students in areas that I'm capable. Obviously, if you want me for 7th or 8th grade math, I'm going to have to refer you someone else. But if you're having problems writing, pretty much emergent all the way through. My son's in master's degree studies, and I do his editing and revising as much as I can, collaborating with him and trying to keep his ideas in place, but just how to be more succinct and specific. And so it's partly helping kids learn how to write better, correct? Well, that's one of my services.
One of the services.
One big thing we did at St. Joan of Arc, we were a Leader in Me school, which is the Franklin Covey effective habits for adults, highly effective habits, and our kids were versed. Our students were versed in what did a win-win mean? What does putting others first and then thinking of ourselves second thing? What does being proactive mean? And so I recognized that one of the really great things we also did was Strengths Finder, which is a Gallup program, a product, I should say, and the Strengths Finder reveals to you a lot of things about yourself, but when you work with others and you know what their strengths are, and you wonder sometimes in certain settings, like, how come when I work with these people, productivity and creativity flows, but when I work with these people, it's more, I feel like I'm in isolation, And so in a classroom environment, the same thing exists for teachers to decide how to pair students together.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things in a classroom was group work, when students were working together and ideas were spewing forth, and the best of the best was revealing itself, and one idea would lead to another, and the kids would be so excited and be like, Miss Andriole, look what we're going to do. Look at how we're going to fix this or create this. And it's just such joy in learning when the students reveal it to themselves. And so I had the idea of not just doing individual one-to-one tutoring, but also let's do some small group stuff, which is where readers and writers workshops came from, when kids can collaborate, read together, share their ideas, know what their strengths are, recognize the strengths of those sitting around them, and how do those go into goal setting, which kind of gets back into that Leader in Me mindset. So what I learned at Joan of Arc, working there with the Leader in Me program and the strengths, I just kept thinking, I can't keep this under a bushel, like the Bible says. You have to let the light shine. And so I kind of thought, I have to share this with people. And so I that's when the seed was planted. Then I was like, I'm going to have 60 days off before the next school year starts. What am I going to do with my time? I'll just work with kids. So that's kind of how Learn Away with Mrs. A came forth.
Okay, well, let's jump to school starting, then come back to Learn Away with Mrs. A.
Okay.
You're going to be back in the classroom, too.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
That's sort of out of left field.
Talk about that and why.
So I, as a North Deanery principal, worked with principals every single day in a text group at least, monthly meetings, whenever we needed one another. We were really tight. And one of my close colleague friends was Keely Bodette at St. Pius Parish. And she just texted me out of the blue one Friday night, I think it was, a few weeks ago. By any chance, would you teach first grade? I'm trying to interview. There's just not a lot of candidates out there, and first grade is not something a lot of principals are real excited about putting someone brand new in. Albeit I don't have first grade experience, and so there goes a new training, Orton Gillingham.
And that's difficult to go from like 5th grade to 1st grade.
I think your primary teachers, as an administrator, I always thought kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade teachers needed a different kind of expertise than your intermediate. At the intermediate grades, I definitely had emergent readers, but not beginning, not necessarily. They might have holes in their phonics or phoneme or phonetic understanding, but they don't not read at all. And sometimes in first grade,
And these kids are just learning to read.
these kids are just learning to read. So that requires new training for me. But I'm up for the task. I'm super humbled that Keeley thought of me. I'm sort of surprised I said yes, because I once said never again 180 days in the classroom, and then I laugh at myself because here I am, and I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about it.
Should mention that not only was Janet's sister, or my late daughter Shannon, a teacher, I was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher. And so there's a lot of that in the family history.
And I think Mom's grandfather was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse.
Well, he might have been.
Grandpa
I don't
Ramsey.
know that one.
Yeah.
I don't know about that one. I know Grandpa Ramsey was a character. I know that. So you mentioned the tutoring in writing.
Yeah.
What else are you tutoring kids in?
So reading comprehension. When I work with students starting at about age 11, I want to administer the Strengths Finder for them first, because when parents are like, you're going to tutoring, sometimes students think of that as punitive repercussions for something they're not doing well. And so one of my top priorities is always establishing rapport with students, gaining their trust, because I always know when I was having a hard time in school, the teachers I trusted the most, I worked hardest for. Mrs. Burge at Cathedral, a Dr. Fortin at Xavier, Mrs. Cook in grade school.
Good old Mrs.
Some
Cook.
of my top teachers, some of my favorite teachers, might have been challenging and expected more out of me, but I trusted it. I trusted them. So by establishing the Gallup Strengths Finder with the students and having them come in and kind of really dig into what does that mean about them and their personality, their God-given strengths, and informing goals for themselves, where we don't look at it as a negative, we look at it as opportunity for growth. And then the academic work can begin. So I ask the parents to kind of take a personal inventory about what are your goals for your child, but then I ask the child. I will ask the child, like, what is it you'd like to be better at and why? And don't just tell me because my mom said I have to be here or my dad gets mad, because you did get mad.
I did sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, all for the better, right? So on my website, you'll see I will, how many offerings that I have. There's all kinds of opportunities parents can look at, and then they can submit a request for a call or email consultation about things. I'm not a learning disabled. I'm not a special education teacher. But after,
I'm glad you made that distinction.
Yeah, after so many years and thousands of students I've encountered, I do have skill sets based on what I've learned from others. But I'm definitely not licensed with that. But sometimes, again, it's just that one-to-one circumstance, that opportunity to have the children feel like they can be successful. I think one of the biggest advantages is I don't administer grades. So since I don't administer grades, kids, sometimes that pressure that they bring to the school setting can come off their shoulders, and they can kind of breathe a little and let it out. So
okay.
Last week I ran Writers Workshop in my basement with them because I'm launching it new. So I decided to do a pilot. I had a 6th grade nephew.
You're practicing, right?
Yeah, practicing. It's like my practicum for my own business. A 6th grade nephew, 4th grade niece, 2nd grade niece, 3rd grade friend, who's like a cousin to them. And I thought to myself, those are various ages, various interests. How am I going to manage it all? And we had a great time. I introduced something called Breakout EDU. Have you heard of escape rooms?
No.
It's a
Ryan's shaking his head.
Ryan
Yes.
knows. Escape rooms are like field trip type things for adults, or small groups that want to build teamwork and collaboration, and they get locked in a room and they have to use their skill sets to figure out how to get out of the room by clues and tips and working together. And then if they get out, they like to post like, we escaped, we made it.
Oh.
Well, Breakout EDU is a small version of it. It's a series of boxes, locks with different various codes, shapes, colors, numbers.
Is that a website, Breakout EDU?
There's a digital platform for it where I get the games, and there's a digital way to play it, but there's also the tangible way. Comes with little coding flashlights because you can't read everything on the page unless you use the flashlight. And
you have the flashlights in your...
Oh yeah, the whole kit.
Okay.
The whole kit comes with it. The kids every day at the end of our session together from 9 to 2 got to do Breakout EDU. Sometimes there's clues hidden around the room, and one clue leads to finding the other. They're like little detectives, but they're really using higher level thinking skills by playing a game and having a ball. I think game playing is super important, so sometimes we play some games. It teaches more than strategy. It teaches how to, think about others and have good sportsmanship and patience and things like that. So it's holistic, really.
Okay, so we got the reading and we got the writing, but you mentioned other things to me besides those things. Or is that all wrapped up in this discussion?
Well, there's the leadership, the strengths, find our strengths, and it's all wrapped up in the discussion. When the kids come in, each day we have our priorities, and at first they don't pay attention to my priorities. And then the next day, when they know what something means, like a keyword outline, or they know what BE-EDU, breakout, BO-EDU, like they look at that because they want to go, when's that coming in our day?
Yeah,
and when I put...
Okay, that's the game thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do a lot. I mean, the structure and style that I just finished, actually I have to do my assignment today, but I just finished my 9th unit yesterday, and I'll be certified in that with the Institute for Excellence in Writing. With that training and the fact that I've been 6 in 1 traits trained, which is actually Christina Smeckens is a local Indiana girl, but her methods for teaching teachers writing instruction is renowned and really popular because you can find big bang immediately in students writing by teaching, the traits specifically.
Now, we should probably mention that wrapped up in all of this, you have 3 children.
I do.
And so my grandkids, my oldest 3 grandkids, and your husband passed away during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was intrigued when he left teaching that he went to work for an accounting firm, a large one.
Yeah.
And one of his jobs was to teach the CPAs how to write, which comes back to what you're doing.
Right.
Somehow or other, how do you become a CPA without learning how to write? But this firm recognized our CPAs can't write.
Yeah.
That's an incredible thought.
Well, I think
right?
the art of writing gets lost when you write for specific purposes only. So when you
write technical jargon.
Right, you write technical jargon or numbers are your business or
Yep.
you've ventured out. And so getting back to what does it mean to write for a different audience? And that's what I always tell students when I was in classrooms this year in junior high classrooms, and I'd be in a classroom of a phenomenal writing teacher, I'd be like, you really don't understand the value of this and how this is going to set you aside or ahead of peers. Because eloquent writers, proficient speakers, we're just not doing enough of that in our schools.
You mentioned proficient speakers. Is that another aspect of this?
It is in the structure and style.
Okay.
It's a component of learning to write is learning to speak. And you practice it with one.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the fear of public speaking, if that's...
Yeah, I mean, that will be something we'd have to address through strengths and setting goals. I think that's something that people have to do. Each person's different. What works for one doesn't work for another. Just like in a classroom, every child's different. What works for one does not work for all. Can't give them all the same thing. So that's sort of something I have to work with students. But for one thing I did in my academic classroom was every day when the students walked into the classroom, I came up with this idea because I recognized students were reluctant to speak, 2 kids immediately went to the computer and they pulled a piece of paper out that we had brainstormed topics of the students' interest, because student interest is important in how well they're going to do. And eventually you have to transfer that to sometimes things that we don't really want to read, but we have to. But if we don't have
There's plenty of that.
If we don't have the skill set to do that,
it takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness to read something you don't want to read.
But you also have to have a skill set in place.
Yep.
And so you can build that with high interest. Where was I? I was talking about we were talking about student interest. We were talking about writing and speaking. And they would research the topic. I gave them 5 minutes to do a research on Google, and they would jot ideas. And then after we graded morning work, which they were exempted from because they got to research, they had to present. They had to do a 2-minute presentation.
Okay.
And the whole class had to do it. And I let them pass one day, but the second day they had to do it. So, and not a kid ever refrained to do it.
Talk about, we probably ought to let the viewers know where this tutoring takes place physically.
Right. So I don't give my address out unless I'm working with a client. But I'm basically located we are basically located in Carmel at 116th east of Keystone, between Allisonville and Keystone, proximity-wise. And I'm sure in Google anybody can find my address anyway, but I just don't like to put it on a lot of the materials.
That's good enough. Just so people, if they live in Brownsburg, they got to know how far they got to drive if they want to use this service. Now, I have visited Janet's remodeled basement. It's been remodeled into a tutoring classroom, I guess, and it's fabulous.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to start, for the kids to start rolling in, you hope.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I'm going to teach first grade this year. I'm super excited about it, but I'm going to leave my evenings open. And weekend, I'm going to have weekend time with all 3 kids gone away and launched in their schooling.
Tell us what the 3 kids are doing.
Okay, Nick is entering his 2nd year at the University of West Georgia as a graduate assistant in the baseball program. He's studying student services, a master's in student services.
And Nick is 25.
Nick is 25.
Yep.
And Nick is in love. But
yes, he is.
We'll save that for another day. Jacob just graduated from Eckerd College, which is in Tampa, St. Pete, Florida. We're super excited about that because Jacob disliked school more than I did. I actually liked it.
But he loves baseball.
By the time we got to college, he loves baseball. He's going to the Belmont Abbey in North Carolina
for 2 more years of baseball and graduate school.
Very excited. He's getting a master's in organizational leadership. I think his skill set will really relay well to that. And then Allison is relaunching. Her first opportunity for college too quick after her dad died. Too much to work out. She's been home doing some work on herself, which I was an advocate for with certain conditions. And she's in a super place mentally, and she's going to go to the University of Dayton, much to our chagrin. And in the fall, but I'm a mom, so what she wants comes first.
That's great, Janet. Thanks for coming in and talking about Learn Away with Mrs. A. Give us that website again.
It's www.learnawaywithmrs.com.
Okay. Next week, my guest will be Sherry Bush with Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities oversees, a dozen local wonderful charities like Miracle Place and the food pantry down at 30th and Keystone and all kinds of other stuff. So she'll tell us all about that. We'll see you all next week on the Indy's Trusted Servant Show.